Hi guys, and welcome to the weekly session with Foundation Age Coaching. Today is a developing possession practice that I used with my under-9s this past week. The session was run with 12 players. As I said, the team is an under-9 team, so it's a mixture of under-8 and under-9 players. I had access to a full 7v7 pitch. However, if you've only got access to space smaller than that, you can still utilise this practice, no problem at all. I used cones, bibs, balls, mini discs and mini goals, and the session ran for an hour and a half. As far as the detail for the session was concerned, the what was possession basics, the how was players using their first touch, their body shape and their awareness to be able to keep possession, the why was to be able to keep the ball away from an opponent and give us a better chance of moving the ball towards the opponent's goal. The when was the building phase of our attacks, and the where we was looking specifically at developing our possession in our own half of the pitch to be able to move it forward once we've drawn the opponents to the ball. Who was involved? It depends on how you want to position this. You could look at it in terms of a centre midfielder and 2 defenders, or you could even look at it in terms of the goalkeeper and the 2 players at the back. Where I currently coach, we play a 2-3-1 at this age group, and as a result, that's why I would be looking at those particular positions. Of course, if you play a different formation, then you might want to paint a different picture for your players. Finally, the objectives of the session were move to be seen from a courageous point of view. One of the things I've noticed with my under-9s is when they stand there and ask for a pass, they tend to hide behind an opponent and cut off the passing line. So that's what I wanted to see from them from a courageous point of view. Remind that courageous was one of the values that they chose in terms of what they think makes a great team. The collaborative objective was to support at an angle, in particular to make sure the player on the ball has an angle, someone at an angle to their left and someone at an angle to their right. And the kind objective was to keep helpful spacing. I wanted to highlight the fact that maintaining width and keeping our distance is going to be more helpful for your teammate on the ball rather than standing right next to them. The arrival activity was a 3v3. As you might have noticed in previous weeks, this is one I like to use a lot. For the purpose of this session, because it was going to be quite heavily possession based, I just wanted to give them the chance to have 5 or 10 minutes at the start for a bit of freedom, to be able to be creative, to be able to use their dribbling skills, to be able to have a bit of a chat with their friends as well. 3v3 is a really easy setup, especially when you've got 12 players. You can put players into these games as soon as players arrive so that the first 4 that arrive can start playing 2v2, and as the next players arrive you can put them straight into that game and then start the next one as the other players to arrive. That way you haven't got kids standing around looking for things to do, plus it gives you an opportunity to see where the kids are mentally, how they're acting, how they're behaving, are they fatigued, are they energised, are they excited. All these bits of information that are going to be very helpful in terms of you managing your players at your coaching sessions. Activity number 1 was a 3 versus 1 rondo with a slight tweak to it, as it allowed me to set my practice up and make sure that I only had to pick up minimal cones. As you can see from the video, it's been split into 2 pitches. Now this was in preparation for the next part of the practice, which you'll see shortly. And while my focus was on the 3 in possession, I also wanted to give the 1 an opportunity to do something once they win the ball. So, as you can see, it's 3 versus 1. If the player's in possession, if the group of 3 are allowed to keep the ball for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 passes, whatever you want that to be, then they get a point. Additionally, if the player in the middle wins the ball, can they then go and score in the goal in the area that they're using? Now this has a double effect. Obviously it's helping these players realise that when they win the ball, they've then got to do something with it. And additionally, the players in possession then have to transition to out of possession, try and win the ball back, and then get back into their in possession shape. This is something that we as coaches can sometimes forget. We do these lovely practices where the ball starts with the team in possession and they always get an easy start, but we forget about those moments of transition where players then have to rediscover their shape. And this is a really good tweak to a classic rondo style practice that will allow your players to do that. Within the groups of 4, each player had 45 seconds to a minute to be in the middle. Give everyone a chance in the middle, then have a discussion with your players. In particular for me, I wanted to talk about moving to be seen in this part of the practice. And that meant I would ask questions like, how can you move to be seen? Are you both in separate spaces, or are you standing together? How can you do it so you can confuse the one player in the middle so they can't keep an eye on both of you? It was more question led than it was me commanding. It's something I'm trying to develop in myself as a coach at the moment, and I'm trying to get those bits of information out of the players rather than me feeding it to them. After the 3v1, I split players into groups of 6. It was a sort of a mini 3v3 possession game. Again, we started with the 3 versus 1 possession. This time the challenge was, after you've made 5 passes, a second defender can come across, and then you're going to try and keep another 5 passes until a third defender comes across. As far as the defenders was concerned, they had the opportunity to try and score if they won the ball within 5 seconds, and if they couldn't do that, then they could pass back and look to keep possession themselves. After the initial practice where it was a 3 versus 1, this is a nice way to gradually introduce an extra defender, so players have to think a little bit differently. We wanted to talk about the angles that they needed to provide, especially in the 3 versus 1, so we had that triangle around the defender, and then also how that allowed players to move to be seen once the second defender came in. More often than not, should I say, when the 2 defenders split, when the 2 attackers split, the 2 defenders will go with them, and then there'll be a gap for someone to run in and play that pass through them. After we'd done this practice for a few minutes and I felt like the players were getting it, we then moved on to the progression. The progression was to turn it into more of a game-like practice. So once again, we'd start with the 3 versus 1. As soon as the second defender came in to make it a 3 versus 2, the team in possession were then allowed to break. Once again, it's the picture of we've drawn defenders to our half, we've drawn defenders to the ball. Can we now look and go and exploit that space that we've created? I didn't really want to talk to the players about what happens once this opens up, because it was more about how they see things, and that's something we'd be building into the following week. But I just want to see how they reacted so I can start making mental notes myself in terms of how they're interpreting that kind of situation, so we can talk about it next week, rather than me going off on tangents simply on what I want to see, but more so that I'm working with them in terms of how they are seeing things within this type of practice. The final part of the session was a 4 versus 4 plus 4 game. The final objective that I wanted to cover was to keep helpful spacing, and having the jokers out wide allowed me to paint that picture. One of the problems I've had, or one of the challenges this team has had this season, has been crowding around the board and not really understanding their spacing when we've got the ball. In particular, the players who play wide like to come in and they get a little bit lost at times. So I've been using a lot of these joker type games to encourage that width, and I thought this was going to be a really good way for the players to see those triangles that we've talked about, but also by having an overload in possession of 8 versus 4, there was always an opportunity for 2 or 3 of them to be able to move to be seen. So we're linking the previous objectives that we've talked about to this part of the practice as well, before building in the new one of keeping helpful spacing. The group was split into 3 teams of 4, so 2 teams would play for 6 minutes with 1 team on the outside. Then after 6 minutes, that outside team would come in, another one would rest. They'd then play for 6 minutes, and so on and so forth, so that each team played both of the others. As far as the jokers was concerned, I gave them a 3-second possession limit. Previous week I'd given it a 2-touch limit, and I felt that players were controlling the ball and then taking quite a while to pass it back in. So I wanted to make it a little bit more game realistic and make it a second limit rather than a touch limit, so players still had to play and see things with a bit of speed. Now if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up below, and don't forget to follow for week 5, which is coming next Sunday.